Hello, welcome to the NBA Breakdown here, powered by Pinnacle with me, James Gregg, Joe Vardon of The Athletic, and Seth Partnow as well, the stats bomb man who joins us, and as does Joe, every single episode all the way through this NBA season, which just before I press record on this podcast, Seth did say we are now out of the multiple game a day portion of the NBA season, which has got to be a bit of a relief when you are soaking in as much basketball as you two are, guys. Before we kind of preview the last four stage effectively is where we are now. Just going to have a little look back because since the last podcast, there's been a few little changes, I suppose, big changes as well. Joel Embiid, regular season MVP over Jokic. I mean, that was a surprise if we were looking back at the preseason odds, but actually having watched all the basketball that you guys have throughout the season, is that such a surprise? You know, how come that is the case, Joe?
Well, this is a tough time to talk about this because we're talking about it after Joel Embiid goes out into game 7 and just laid a historically bad egg and just looked like anything but the MVP. So we need to start by reminding our listeners that the MVP is not a postseason award. It's a regular season award. And I just, I'll just say to you, as I've been saying since the votes came out, it was a close decision in terms of like when you sit down at your ballot and you think about this. Jokic he's analytically the superior player, but he didn't play nearly as many games as he's used to playing. And Joel played about as many and was just so thoroughly dominant. And actually within the final couple of weeks of the regular season, Joker didn't play almost at all. And I actually do think that made the vote from close statistically to what it was, which was, I mean, Joel won comfortably. I voted for Embiid. I changed my vote with probably about a week to go, maybe a little bit less than that. And for those reasons. Looking back, we're all going to feel silly about it just because of what happened in the playoffs, but it is a regular season award. It was close enough. He had never been MVP before, and he did a good job carrying the Sixers.
Okay. Now, the whole way through, I just want the listeners who are listening on the podcast platform, they won't have seen Seth's face, right? So Seth, the whole way through, was rubbing his hands with a huge grin on his face. And I can't wait for this. I think we've unleashed him early on here, Joe.
All right.
Joe said this is a hard day to talk. This is not a hard day at all to talk about this. I don't have a ballot. I have a fake. I'm a participant in Tim Bontemps straw poll. I had Jokic as the MVP essentially most of the way through the season and through the end of the season. This isn't to take a victory lap, although it is a little. Other than to say that part of the narrative reason why Embiid, even before the last little bit of the season, was even kind of seen as close, was the supposed playoff problems faced by Nikola Jokic. And while that was always kind of ridiculous on its face, if you actually examined, one player has essentially always bettered his regular season numbers and performance in the postseason, and the other has been equivocal, has certainly played well against worse opposition when the rubber kind of hits the road later in the series. The postseason, things start to get rockier a little bit. So that was the facts on the ground, and we kind of have seen that play out again so far. So while I wasn't surprised for narrative reasons that Embiid ended up winning, that's not the direction I would have gone. And I'm smelling the roses and feeling a little vindicated today. So I will indulge after all the campaigning that went on for it, including some unseemly amounts from members of a certain organization. I don't feel bad indulging a little bit of petty today.
I mean, this was the most important thing for the Sixers in a very long time. Organizationally, it was almost like this was the goal above winning in June. And I think if you put them in front of a microphone, they would argue with that. But if you just watch the behavior, getting Joel this award this year is what mattered. And it was a mission accomplished, but certainly, I mean,
a good analogy.
The way it went after that, boy, you would imagine there would be some changes in Philadelphia this time next year for sure.
That's very, very interesting. Good to get both of your insight on that, because actually it's the sort of thing when you're watching from my side of the Atlantic, you miss all this stuff. But that is quite remarkable. So there we go. Something maybe to factor in, perhaps not next season, but in seasons to come, when we're trying to work out who is going to be the regular season MVP. I suppose the other headline from since we last reconvened here on the NBA Breakdown was the fact that the Bucks were out in the first round, despite having the best regular season record. Of course, Coach Bud fired. That wasn't really a big surprise. You guys were saying just before we kind of got going. The big question is Giannis going to stay?
That is a big question. I don't think we know the answer to that yet. I'm not sure he totally knows the answer, because I think it's very much as these things tend to be, kind of up to him. And I wouldn't even start to speculate as far as like, does he know what he wants to end up doing? My guess is that it's not anything that's going to happen before next season. Kind of give it. Let's see what we retool in this offseason after this this disappointment. But beyond that, I think a lot of it depends on how that sort of retooling, whether it's the roster, whether it's the coaching staff, plays out.
So a couple things. He is under contract with no above board tactic of getting out of it for 2 more full seasons before that player option, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I read that.
Yeah, I think so. So, I think everybody gets nervous about next summer, if he is going to go into what would be the final year where the team has control. I put that in quotations in the modern era here, before they get any kind of further commitment from him about what he's going to do. I think he's been in the league now 9 or 10 years, close. And so let's say for sure that he stays this year. That's not even, we shouldn't say it like that. There's no doubt that Giannis Antetokounmpo will play for the Milwaukee Bucks next season. That is without question. What you start talking about is if he does not want to commit to the Bucks next summer beyond what is left on his contract, then you have to start talking about, what do you do with him then? Do you risk him opting out of the final year of his deal and going into free agency, in which you lose him, or you lose him for nothing? Or do you try to trade him? This happens all the time in the NBA. But I think you run into a scenario where he's one of those players that is virtually untradeable. Like what can you get for him that is fair value? And also, if you're the Bucks, like if you lose Giannis, I think that is an automatic rebuild. I think that is Cavs level. You're going to suck for a few years. And the Cavs actually made it back in 5 years. That's not bad. It's not bad at all. And so, I am in the corner of, I am very leery about Giannis not playing the next 2 years in Milwaukee, just because the Bucks should hold on to him for as long as they can. And the decision for him is going to be like, after being in the NBA for as long as he will have been there in the league by the time that comes up, does he want to experience other parts of this country? Does he want to see something else? I don't know. He's somebody who has said he nearly quit basketball over anxiety from pressure. So does he want to go somewhere where that's bigger and where he's not comfortable? I don't know that. I mean, things change for sure, but I just, I'm leery of this entire conversation.
I'll be honest. I'll be honest as well. The thing is, you say that about the pressure, wherever he moves, there is a point to be made that he is going to be expected to deliver, right? And sometimes, as good as a player as he is, as great as a player as he is, and has been down the years, you expect him to deliver wherever he goes. And that might not always be the case. You know, some franchises, some teams might not be the right fit for somebody like that. He strikes me as somebody who does need everything to kind of be absolutely perfect, to kind of be working. So that will be interesting to see out. And yes, it is 2025 that his contract runs out. So we'll have to wait and see. Good little digression. The Bucks are out, so we'll kind of move on from talking about them. Let's get talking about what we do have in front of us, and it's the Celtics against the Heat, the Nuggets against the Lakers. Where to start? I think what we'll do is we'll start talking about the Heat and the fact that they very nearly lost to the Bulls and didn't make postseason, and then are just now, to put it mildly, turning up. And are they just a team that are absolutely oven ready, built and made for the playoffs?
I don't know. After we do this, I'm going to pack my suitcase and I'll be leaving for Boston to cover the series. And I was at the bubble when they played, they played in the bubble, and then they played each other last year in the conference finals as well. And to me, this matchup just isn't like any of those other years. I can't really explain exactly how the Heat have gotten this far, other than circumstances were exactly right for an upset in round one. And then if you do that as an 8 seed, obviously you get a more favorable matchup in round two. And the Knicks aren't a very good matchup, or you say it the other way, I guess. Like that's somebody that he could pick on. Jimmy Butler's been awesome, and they run a lot of things through Bam Adebayo, which is cool and has been effective, but they're not as deep as they have been in any of their previous playoff runs as an organization. And Boston seems to be finding its stride. And I just think matchup wise, without that guy, that PJ Tucker guy, to slow down Tatum a little bit, I don't see it this time for the Heat.
Seth?
So it's hard to, on paper, disagree with anything Joe just said. Aside from the fact that, the playoffs tend to be about discovering who can't play as much as anything else. Like the rotation strength, you see it over the both over the course of individual series and as you get deeper in the playoffs. Like certain guys, just as the level of competition, as the ability to prep for teams gets better, guys get weeded out. And then you've got Miami, where Eric Spoelstra looks down the bench and says, "No, you can play now." And the guy, "Yes, I can," runs in the game and performs. I mean, there were times across this playoffs where they have closed games with Jimmy Butler and 4 undrafted players on the floor. So, yes, you don't have to scratch the Heat very far to get into, well, their next guy in their rotation is Caleb Martin, is Gabe Vincent, is Haywood Highsmith. Those guys have all performed. These guys have all performed, done valuable things this postseason. So you mentioned Jimmy Butler, and he obviously deserves a big portion of the credit. But this is once again affirming that Eric Spoelstra is the best coach in the NBA, and I don't think it's particularly close at this point. And that said, the flip side of this is Boston's a better team on paper. I think we've seen over the last couple of years in the postseason, including this year, certainly in the first round against Atlanta, you can argue that they kind of did the same thing, just in a different order against Philadelphia in terms of dropping game one with Embiid not playing. This is a team that kind of has to win 5 or 6 games to win 4 in the postseason because of their tendency over the last couple of years to self-destruct down the end of games, stop playing offense with 6, 8, 10 minutes left, and allow teams to come back in games and drop games they should. So you've got the one team that's maximizing every possible thing and some seemingly impossible things versus the more talented team that has has used every bit of cushion that they have. So I think that the Celtics should be favored. I think that, we might come on to it later, but I think that some of certainly the championship win prices are doing a little bit of a disservice to Miami, and the fact that we went into the first round saying Miami's no danger to Milwaukee. Oops. I think we have to be very leery of falling into a similar trap with respect to the Heat and the Celtics.
Certainly. Well, just to point that out with Pinnacle, I mean, look, I don't make the odds, right? None of us do. Just looking here, as we record this, Miami Heat are 12.92, which is, I mean, miles, the sort of kind of the fourth favorites for the overall title. And actually, we'll sort of talk about some of these as well later on. But on Pinnacle, there is also the sort of the series bets as well. And even there, they're so, everybody's scared stiff of the Celtics. Of course they are, who are the favorites, by the way, still at 2.0. Then the Denver Nuggets, and it's quite tight between them and the Lakers at the moment. But that is quite astonishing that they're that far out at 12s, when the other teams are like 2 and 3 to get the job done. I suppose the argument is that actually we do see different teams in the playoffs up to a point, but doing it all the way through is very difficult, isn't it? That's kind of the, I suppose what I'm trying to say is that cream rises to the top in the end, right? That's the whole point of the 7-game series.
Yeah, I think I've forgotten the statistic because I just threw it in the memory waste bin. I covered the Heat in the play-in, and when they came back and beat the Bulls, somewhere in my story I said that that no 8th place team has gotten to like the Eastern Conference or gotten to the conference finals since it's been like 30 years, I think.
I think it was the Knicks in '99, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so it's been forever and a day, and this is just not something that happens. Spoelstra, I agree. I absolutely agree with that. I think Spoelstra is the best coach we have in the league right now. And then I think we should mention that the Heat couldn't make threes all year, and now they are again. I'm not sure why. Maybe Seth could explain that, but they are, the ball's going in the hole again. Max Strus has found it. Duncan Robinson, who I think had his worst year as a pro, he's forced into playing and he's making these shots now. And Kyle Lowry has been really effective off the bench. And then the other thing is that Kevin Love, and this is maybe something to talk about, Kevin Love has continued to be playable and effective in these playoffs. And the Cavs dumped him because they didn't think he would be. I think the Celtics pose a really huge matchup problem for Kevin. But he's been viable, and he has been an excellent defensive rebounder, and throwing the outlet pass off those defensive rebounds has turned the Heat into a better team than they were for much of the regular season. Is that something that can last in this series?
Seth, is it something that can last in the series?
I mean, it'll be that is sort of the first big kind of matchup question. I think that Joe Mazzulla has gotten praise, and rightly so, for going back to starting Robert Williams and Al Horford. I suspect that might reverse kind of along for reasons Joe is talking about. I think there's a place for Kevin Love to go defensively if Boston is starting 2 bigs, and if they aren't, then you get into weird questions like, well, do you have him guard Marcus Smart or something like that? And that might be something worth exploring, honestly. I think if you can induce the Celtics to run as good as Marcus Smart was at certain points in certainly in Game 6 of the previous round, I think you probably like it if you induced Boston to run more of their offense through Marcus Smart. So maybe there's something to try there, but I do think that is one of the initial interesting matchup wrinkles of the series.
Isn't this the Boston team? Isn't this the deepest of the Tatum Brown era? And I kind of feel like they if this group doesn't win this year, the group's not going to win. Like they've gotten to the conference finals against an 8 seed. I don't want to continue to disrespect Denver as I have for all this time. But I just think this lines up right. They're going to be at home throughout the remainder of the playoffs. They're deeper than they've ever been with this group, and they've been there. They were just there the last year. Tatum rose up in the most important game of the season. Like you said, they went back to Robert Williams, which I get it. Maybe that doesn't make sense against the Heat, but overall, that's something they have to continue to do, even if they don't start that way, because of the matchup problems with everybody else that it causes. So I think they're there. I think if Boston doesn't win the finals now, it's not going to happen.
Let's have a little look at the West, because the Lakers saw off the defending champions in 6 games. What's changed for them? I know we spoke a little bit about the Lakers, actually, to be fair, on our last record, but we've got a bit more kind of a sample size, a bit more of a focus, obviously, certainly now they're kind of in the last 4 and in this Western Conference final. So what has changed for them? Anthony Davis was obviously a bit of a superstar. You know, his numbers were really, really good. So what was it? You know, what is it, and how seriously can we take them now as kind of title contenders overall?
This is actually a good segue from Boston, insofar as what Joe's talking about, like especially when Boston shrunk their rotation to 7 players. They have they have 7 top 75 or thereabouts players, and that's their entire rotation. And again, we talked earlier about guys becoming unplayable in the playoffs. A lot of the playoffs is just not having to put bad players on the floor. And I think that with the trades the Lakers made in season, they have gotten to the point where that is mostly true. You may not know necessarily game to game who those 6, 7, 8 guys are, but they have enough guys who you can reasonably count on that they can get 240 quality minutes. Obviously, AD and LeBron are going to get the lion's share of the credit. Austin Reeves has emerged. I think he's someone who is going to get paid quite well this offseason based on his postseason play. But even I think an unsung hero, really, of the Golden State series was Dennis Schroeder. In large part, that series turned on the fact that I think Stephen Curry didn't. The last couple of games was not able to go full Steph. And I think a large part of that is the fact that Schroeder really wore him down defensively over the course of the series. Whether there are the guys on Denver for whom that necessarily means the same thing, I don't know. But that's the example of kind of the role players that LA is getting so that they can always have these 5-man units that make sense on the floor. And I think that's the big difference from what we saw earlier in the year, where there were just sometimes just like, man, how does this lineup even work? And they just have to do that so much less now than they did, through February.
Joe, thoughts?
Yeah. I have a few. There's been this sentiment out there that this is the best supporting cast that LeBron has ever had. And there have been times where I've actually taken the bait on that. And I think shame on me, because I had been a beat writer on some of his teams. And I don't think that this Laker team is better or deeper than the 16 Cavs, and certainly not the 17 Cavs, who lost in 5 games to the Warriors anyway, but that was the KD Warriors at their peak. So I don't think that's true. But I do think that Rob Pelinka had made a number of changes to this roster that made more sense. And what we have seen is, if you just make competent decisions around these 2 superstars, albeit one of them is aging and hasn't played as fast or been as dominant in these playoffs, we can't argue that. But just having guys that just make sense around LeBron and AD has enabled them to sort of be who they are and carry this team through the playoffs. And I know I just said that LeBron hasn't looked like the same LeBron. That is true, but he's still over 25-5 just about every night. And then in the closeout game in game 6, he goes for, I think, 30 points, 9 rebounds, and 9 assists. He was dominant, but he's playing against a guy who at least every other game goes for 20 plus points and 15 plus rebounds. Now, Anthony is not as consistent as a dominant superstar should be, but when he is on, he's playing like Wilt. And then in the meantime, you have these other guys around them that just make enough sense. Like, I want to give Austin Reeves a ton of credit, and I do agree he will be paid handsomely. But the first 3 games in the series against the Warriors, he wasn't very good. And then he turned it back on. Rui Hachimura has been pretty steady and great coming off the bench for the Lakers. But I mean, he's had a couple nights of 6 points. D'Angelo Russell at times took ridiculously bad shots, but also held his own enough against a guy like Steph and was able to stay on the floor. And then like Seth said, Schroeder, he's an adult and plays that way, and he makes a big difference coming off the bench. So I just think surrounding these 2 superstars with players that just make sense standing next to them is really all the Lakers have needed so far.
I just want to, I mean, look, we've got 5 minutes or so until we kind of wrap this up, guys, but we're obviously going to touch on the Denver Nuggets before we kind of conclude, and then let the actual basketball see if what we talked about is going to prove us right or not. But Denver Nuggets, somebody asked me the other day, are the Denver Nuggets the best side in the entire league? And I said no, and then kind of struggled to work out who was. But then actually, if I'm going by the odds and the traders at Pinnacle, the Denver Nuggets are actually outsiders to beat the Lakers, and they are the second favorites to win the entire competition. So the fact that they're out at 2.5 to win this 7-game series on the exact results page on pinnacle.com, by the way, for those interested in having a look at that, because it's quite interesting. I'm a little bit surprised, and I suppose a lot of the listeners are trying to find a bit of value with what we're talking about here in the betting market. But in pure basketball terms, because that's what you two specialize in here, the Denver Nuggets, are they going to beat the Lakers first and foremost? Forget the NBA title overall. Are they going to beat the LA Lakers?
You're asking for a 100% prediction, and we don't do that. But no, I think it's funny. You mentioned we have about 5 minutes left, and we're just getting to talking about the Denver Nuggets. It feels like the same as it ever was. I mean, they've been the best team in the West all season. They've been across the entire playoffs. They've been, I think, comfortably the best team. Some of it, Minnesota wasn't the toughest opposition, but they handled Phoenix pretty comfortably. And I think we're on track to do so before Phoenix started getting injuries as well. The Suns needed some pretty incandescent shooting from Devin Booker in particular to even win a couple of games. So I think they should be decent faves against the Lakers. I think they're a better basketball team than the Lakers. And frankly, of the teams that are left, I think they're the best team remaining. The combining kind of the stuff we've been talking about not playing bad players with also having the best player on the floor most nights. Nikola Jokic has been across the playoffs, with due respect to Jimmy Butler and Devin Booker, has been the best player in the playoffs as well. Easy for me to say, having started the pod crowing about MVP things, but I'm gonna, stick with that and say that I think the Nuggets have I think they have the best chance of anyone to win the title. The only reason you might say Boston is because you think that's an easier semifinal matchup than the Nuggets have with the Lakers, and that's fair enough, I suppose.
Yeah, Joe, what are your thoughts on the Nuggets? I mean, you could argue that they are the best team in the league, as Seth has done, and I'm kind of thinking the same now after my friend asked me that question the night. But in terms of this matchup, is it just the sheer LA Lakers, LeBron James, Anthony Davis factor that is perhaps making people doubt the fact that the Nuggets actually have been the best team all season long in that conference?
Yeah, I think that the Denver Nuggets have never done it. They've never even gotten to a finals, and they had this opportunity in 2020 to go through the Lakers, and I think they won one game in that series, if memory serves. And then on the other side, like I know we've spent a lot of time talking about the Lakers, but again, you've got these two champions who have somehow made it this far, and especially the one guy, number 6. When you get him into a conference finals, it's really hard to bet against him. And I agree that Jokic has been the best player in the playoffs. You know, you love the supporting cast with Jamal Murray and Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter Jr. I think that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, a former Laker on that 2020 team, I think he makes a huge difference for them. He's the piece they didn't have. They have him now. But Anthony Davis can guard Jokic. He can. And I don't know if Anthony can stay on the floor. I don't know if he can be consistent, but he's one of the few guys who can give Joker a problem. And if he does, this series gets tighter, and we know that one side has been there before, and so that is the hesitation. You know, the Nuggets have not gotten the credit they deserve, including from me. There's no doubt about that. They've been number 1 in that conference all season long. They're right where they should be. They look great against the Suns, but it is the opponent, and the fact of like until you have done it, it's hard to be on your side.
Every team had never done it once, though. That's what you got to think, haven't you? There's always been a time when all the great franchises down the years had that breakthrough win. It's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. We could talk so much more at length about this. The next time we will convene is for the actual finals of the NBA. And just to mark your card. So we're recording this on Monday, so 2 days out from Wednesday night when Denver Nuggets up against the LA Lakers. And that is when it all kicks off. Best of luck to you, Joe, on your travels and following that Eastern Conference Finals series. Seth, we shall reconvene next time. No MVP chat, though. It's a good way to rev him up, though, Joe, isn't it? I like it.
It sure is.
Well, maybe if the Lakers beat the Nuggets, Joe will flip it around on me, and he can rub his hands together and do a little bit of gloating. And so I look forward to that.
Joe, Seth, thanks so much. We'll be back next time here on the NBA Breakdown. Remember, all odds were correct at the time of recording. There is a load of other sort of pieces as well online breaking down some of the stuff that we've talked about here on the podcast online on the online betting resources page on pinnacle.com. So have a look on there. All odds correct at the time of recording, like I mentioned. And we'll be back next time on the NBA Breakdown. Thanks for listening.